Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Pear Beach Building Committee. This is March 4th. And the first item on our agenda is the approval of a couple of sets of minutes. So the first is for January 22nd. And I just ask the members if you have any comments or questions or amendments. I had one under new business. It's just a spelling. It says comments made by the residents. I think it's meant to be spelled D-E-N-T-S.
January 22nd.
Otherwise, may I invite a motion to approve the minutes from January 22nd?
Moved.
As amended.
Moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. And then the minutes of February 12th. Any questions or amendments? I ask for a motion to approve those minutes. Krista, thank you. Seconded. Randy, thank you. All those in favor? Great. Okay. That's great. So moving on to our next item, it's an update. And in essence, it's really a continuation from where we left off at our last meeting. And just for the benefit of those watching also, one of the things we did as a committee is solicited questions from members of the committee following our last meeting. Just kind of in the spirit of kind of asking for soliciting any clarifications from the team that members of the committee may have left with, or some additional information building on the presentation that the design team had given us at our last meeting. We have those questions. I would have liked to have actually gotten those out to the committee in advance and ideally even done a second round of it just didn't work out that way. So so we have the questions this evening. We'll go through those. Maybe I would just state at the outset before I turn it over, I'd like to just suggest one objective of the meeting. My objective of the meeting this evening would be at the end, kind of respecting everybody's opinion here, but at the end, to get us to a point where we can authorize these guys to go to Hartford and kind of do the next round of analysis with Deep in Hartford. So I guess I'm mentioning it at this stage because as these guys go through the presentation, if you can kind of bear that in mind, and if there's any questions that you have that might be getting in the way of you feeling comfortable kind of allowing these guys to take that step, feel free to just ask for those clarification, that clarification as we go along here. So with that, I'll turn it over to you guys, and thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think I'm just going to turn it over to Dan.
Pass the buck.
Almost all the questions had to do with the site work. Not much touching on the building. So.
Yeah. Great. Well, since our last meeting, last time we did show you the priorities and key considerations that's been the basis of our project being developed. So one thing we did want to point out is that one of the priorities of providing sidewalk access has been removed as from priority. Mike,
yeah, and just to clarify, so to Dan's point at our last meeting and in our last presentation, one of the bullets was, as a priority, provide sidewalks and pedestrian access. Cheryl Russell, who's not with us but is kind of keeping in touch with us, reminded me that the committee actually discussed it, deliberated over it, and removed that as an item early on in our discussions in terms of one of the elements of the plan. It's not to suggest it couldn't come back in, but just that wanted to clarify that was no longer, and in fact it was really Cheryl's request that I referenced that and bring that up to avoid any confusion. So.
Sure. And as the last meeting, we showed you the latest site concept and been working through. So all of our discussions tonight will be revolving around the same site concept, and we're going to run through the various questions that we have been asked to date since our last meeting. I just wanted to point out a couple of the elevations that you're going to see here in our conversation, just for reminders. Catch basin at rim 4.2, my pointer's broken, so yeah, the pointer's right here. Just for reference, 4.2, the coastal jurisdiction limit, 5.5, The rim at the entrance to the parking lot at 5.9, that's in the roadway, but the one inside of the parking lot is 4.9. And an elevation that you haven't seen thus far, but has been true the whole time, is where the storm drain outlet into the storm drains into the waterway is at -2.2. So you're going to see these numbers come up again. Just want to say that they're the same numbers last time, but as we start discussing, you'll see why more and more why they're important for our conversation. So running straight into the questions. I'm not going to read every question verbatim, but just give you a quick summary. The first two questions were really asking as to, are there any other entities that have successfully procured permits or built or elevated parking lots within the coastal jurisdiction limit greater than 12 inches? If so, have these been executed and what's the success? Since our last meeting, reach out to DEEP. We have not heard back yet. I would hoped to hear by now, but I think they're looking into it, just seeing if those permits have been acquired and if there's any successful projects that have been constructed within the harbor or the shoreline areas. So that's still pending, so I hope to have an update for that for the next meeting once I hear back from you. Question number 3, what will be the impact of raising the parking lots on the adjoining road and nearby residential properties? Just for a disclaimer that as we progress the design, we'll be needing to meet the stormwater requirements of the state. Our baseline of that requirement is that we can have no adverse effect on any neighboring properties. We need to handle all stormwater on site. So anything we design is going to be containing stormwater on our site and handling on our own, not shedding water away. So that's just a baseline undertone for everything that will be designed. The second paragraph talks about just the relative elevations, and I talked about elevations of the drain and the inlets, but the entrances and the grades of the parking lot are fairly important. So here you see the entrance to the parking lot is about 6.5. That compared to the elevation of the nearby roadway is 9.0 to 11.0. So just by fact of the simple numbers that the parking lot is lower than the adjacent roadways, just with the understanding that water flows downhill, so that we're actually lower than the road adjacent. So anything we're doing is actually, if we raise the parking lot, obviously at 9.0 or greater, we would then be higher than the adjacent roadway. We're staying lower than that, we've been saying so far. So the goal is to stay below the 9.0, and we'll be containing everything within our project area within the parking lot itself.
Jim, in the proposed plan, what is the highest elevation that we would be raising the parking lot to? Do you recall?
We haven't designed the project yet, but what we are holding is at 6.5 elevation at the entrance as our holding elevation. Okay. So when we design anything, that sets the elevation for everything towards the water, or towards the boat ramp, or towards the concession building. I'll give you some elevations here. So this is fairly helpful, I think, is Neil's question was talking about the site itself. So I mentioned the driveway here is about 6.0. I mentioned to you how it actually goes up in grade. It goes up in grade. So this is the relatively lowest spot, the saddle more or less, within the road itself. There's a little dip here, but it goes down lower to an elevation of 4.2. There was a question about what happens with the water within the parking lot. Where does it go? The blue lines here representing actually the underground piping system, the network of where the water goes. So when water hits the parking lot here, it then runs along the grade of the asphalt into a catch basin, or runs here into a catch basin. It then goes underground and goes out to elevation that is at -2.2. So everything that happens within this area is going to these two storm drains, collected, and then it goes out. Now, as you can see that these two catch basins are not the only ones that feed to that discharge point. We actually have water that's collected within the road of each of these catch basins. They actually feed to that same drain to the -2.2. So the overall system is collecting not only a parking lot, but Carrier Tree Point Road feeds to that catch basin and the discharge is at the same spot. Just for everyone's knowledge that there is a little high point right here, so water that from this point on actually flows into 2 catch basins and directly discharges into the harbor itself right there. So looking at elevations here, high to low, into catch basin, underground, and flowing out at a negative 2.2 elevation. So the question was, in the plans we've been showing you so far, if we move this curb line down 18 feet, what happens to that point? Someone's asking if is that missing? Did we forget about it? Well, we did not. As we move this curb line in, that is new edge of asphalt. We'll have to relocate a catch basin to approximate that location. That would be at the grade of where the new asphalt will be placed once that is properly designed. The question, another question C here is, does catch basin 5.9 in the road drain to the north and discharge from the break wall by the boat ramp? So the answer is yes, as I just showed you. This catch basin is collecting from these various fingers and discharging to negative 2.2 location.
Negative 2.2, is it underwater?
It's below the 0 elevation, so a datum is set of 0. And it's actually negative 2 feet, 2.2 feet below the elevation, but with the varying tide elevations. So I don't know if the tide goes down to maybe negative 3. I'm not really sure what the elevation is, but it's not, it is negative below the 0 datum, but it's not underground, I guess you could say.
So it doesn't back up?
It backs up when there's a high tide. So remember, the high tide comes closer to jurisdiction limit. We know that this floods about 4.6 or so. So yes, that floods a bit of time, or is filled with water. Because water is rising up to 4.6. So it goes over that discharge point and then backs up, and that's what leads to the flooding that happens in this location. Because water is getting to an elevation above that 4.2.
So I guess what you're saying is it also renders the storm drains like up the road ineffective at that point.
Ineffective.
If it's a storm situation.
Storm event, and the water is high tide, say at 4.6, this system here is in theory storing water.
Yeah.
So if the water of the rain event actually fills up all this pipe network, it has nowhere to go, it's eventually going to back up, and I imagine you probably see some ponding in these locations, which are 5.9 definitely would be flooding, or 4.9 would be first, then maybe 5.9, and then as you move back up, it's just going to build up in that system to back water to fill up.
Now, Craig Flaherty in his presentation last week, he showed us the 12-inch and the 24, and he said the 12-inch over a 50-year period was forecast to leave us basically in the situation we're currently in, whereas 24 inches would alleviate flooding of the parking lot. Where does this plan put us?
So this plan is just existing what's there now. This is not proposed. This is what's out there now. So
Okay.
yeah, this is all what's happened today.
Okay.
This network is there today. These catch basins are at these elevations. None of this is proposed. This
Okay,
is what is
okay,
there
that's
now.
coming.
This is just a response
The current state.
to
Yeah.
Cheryl's questions.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah, just for the benefit, once again, of the committee, we had exchanged, all the questions that had come into us, with one exception. Cheryl sent in a set of questions this morning, which I did not get out to you guys. I did get the opportunity to get them out here, and these are the questions that Dan's now going through first.
The same question was, if we raise a parking lot 6 to 9 inches, would that give catch basin 4.2 enough pitch to be piped out? And the answer is yes. So naturally, if this elevation is increased from 4.2 to another number, it's going to raise this elevation here. It's going to make the pitch steeper, and we have plenty of pitch to get water back out to negative 2.2 elevation. If we could pipe this catch basin in that direction towards a road, could then we install a check valve to keep water from entering the pipe. So that was our original intention of what we had planned to do, was that as a network of catch basins and storm drains are proposed within the parking lot, that one way to minimize any of the backwater was to suggest that a check valve could be installed. As we looked into it past couple months, that may not be as beneficial from a cost standpoint, but we'll get there once we go through the design process to determine if that's the best use of funds to have a check valve.
But Dan, is it safe to say, I don't know if this is accurate enough, but this is current state, and what you just described to us in terms of the network of underground storm drain system here is current state. But current state doesn't necessarily need to be an end state once you've redesigned.
Sure.
Like, you may end up with a different solution, right?
Correct. Yeah.
The team may end up with it, which
Yeah.
may have something even other than that negative 2.2 kind of outlet into the, right? We could be talking about something different. So I'm mentioning it because it's like a funny hybrid of an answer that you just gave. Like, I think Cheryl's asking, what if you made a change at that choke point there? Does the current system still support that? But the current system may not be the system that's in place once you've made some further changes, right?
Mostly yes. But what will likely happen if we're going to be using the same discharge point, we're going to be held to this invert of this pipe, because that is connected to this whole system that's offside of us. So if we're going to be using the same pipe, he extends, I'm imagining that we're going to have very minimal elevation change at that catch basin below ground. We won't be able to raise our whole site, and that will discharge a higher point of that catch basin, but we aren't going to be modifying all the way out into the road as a part of this project. Is likely how it's going to end up. We can change the whole system in here. We can adapt and solve all stormwater on our site, but we'll still be held to an elevation of that catch basin if this pipe runs to be used.
Okay.
Now if there's a pair.
Having said that, I don't want to expand the scope of what we're doing, but you're not saying like that run has to be as it is. In other words, if somebody else decided while you're at it,
This here?
that making a change there would improve in other aspects with stormwater management.
As we get to design, one solution could be that there's a parallel line that's at a higher elevation than this pipe has shown. That's possible. We could look at the numbers and determine that we can raise this, and we're gonna thus raise this catch basin here, and the whole system within our park is beneficial, and it benefits the whole road as well.
Yeah, and I'm mentioning it only because I think I recall Craig mentioning kind of multiple additional storm drains placed throughout kind of a...
And it's come down to where it discharges. So yes, we may have a lot of catch basins, maybe 6 within here versus 2, but they're eventually gonna have discharge at some point. So if we're holding to this, we're holding to some other point for stormwater, that's a driving factor to what the elevations can be or can't be within our overall network of catch basins. Yes. I just want to point out here that the road and the parking lot join to one discharge point.
No,
that's fairly critical because we aren't changing the road as part of this project. So the next question, which I'll probably defer to others, is there a distinct seasonality to the high tides that might benefit the summer? From talking with Craig and looking at some analysis that we provided last meeting, and I'm just reading verbatim on this, but based on the 2020 tide charts, of the 128 tides at or above elevation 4.2, 31% occur between Memorial Day and Labor Day, based on the season of use of the park. Of the tides above 4.7, elevation 4.7, almost under a quarter occur during that period. And of the tides at or above 5.2, none of them occur during the summer season. So what does that mean? That means as of the 2020 tide charts, we do not expect any of the high tides to be during this useful period of the beach area, above elevation 5.2. We can say that a third are going to flood out that catch basin, which is at elevation 4.2, during the seasonal use of that park area, beach area. 128 tides, right? And in between the two of those is at 4.7, about a quarter. They're above elevation 4.7, so that means that that catch basin that's at 4.2 is going to see about 6 inches or so of water ponding around that catch basin, about a quarter of the time.
Right. But the explanation for that is on the right, right?
And you can see that one.
Well, the explanation, the explanation comes through Craig, but also, you know, as with all of this, I've kind of dug in a little bit. But basically, the answer to the question is yes, there is a seasonality, and the seasonality is based upon phases of the moon, the distance between the Earth and the sun at different points of the year. I didn't learn all this stuff because I went to New York City public schools, but things like aphelion and perihelion and perigee and apogee and all that kind of stuff. So what this is basically describing here is that, as you can see here, the moon is furthest from the sun. The Earth is furthest from the sun at the summer season and closest to the sun, and then it's a combination of kind of circumstances that occur and lining up in terms of where the moon is in its normal cycle and rotation. In any case, basically what this is confirming, at least what we believe this is confirming, is there's an explanation for what Craig has kind of uncovered in terms of looking at the tide predictions, and that explanation is there is a seasonality. It does suggest that there is suggested seasonality in terms of tidal activity, and that's simply based, once again, on the phases of the moon and the kind of, you know, where the sun is in relation to the Earth.
So I think what that simply relates to is these 15 tides that are high are when we're closest to the sun during the winter, January. They're not happening during times when we're using the beach, which is out in July.
Yeah, I mean, essentially there's a seasonality. And I think Craig goes on to point out that, you know, over time, you know, with the rise in, predicted rise in sea level, of course, the seasonality doesn't change, but the impact of our beach is, we begin to kind of experience a greater impact in that summer season than we are now with the rise in sea level. So Devin's giving me kind of an hairy eyeball here.
Well, I mean, the moon is the prime driver.
Yeah.
And whether it's aligned with the sun or not. And maybe one of the bits of confusion, if you have a new moon or a full moon, you have spring tides.
Yeah.
So a spring tide is not the season of spring, it's the alignment of the sun and the moon together to maximize the tidal range. So.
Yeah. And you've got things like super new moons and things like that as well that are occurring. So.
Yeah, so it just depends. It depends on how the moon aligns with the sun.
Yeah.
The moon's the prime driver. The moon and sun are, if it goes sun, moon, earth, which would be a new moon, you have really strong tides. If it goes sun, earth, moon, which would be a full moon, but everything's in a line, you'd have really high tides again, or low tides. Higher highs, lower lows. There's more gravitational pull.
Yeah.
Again, call it spring tides, not the season of spring.
Okay.
The lunar pulse is the name of it.
Yeah. And I think, once again, what this is confirming is if that's happening at a particular time of the year, it's even more intense than if it's happening at another time of the year.
I suppose, in all honesty, I've never looked at it that granular.
So it's here now.
Earth science.
It's out there. And the answer
Astronomy.
is yes. Or at least we believe the answer is yes at this stage.
Okay.
Until
Next question.
we determine that it's not yes.
The question was, will there be impacts to the entrance to Darien Boat Club? As I mentioned last time, none of the improvements that we're proposing are going to have impacts on the entrance to the boat club. Basically, the elevations of the boat club, elevations of the concession building, those are high elevations, actually blend well with the redesign proposed that we're going to propose for the parking area if we're going to move forward with the parking lot improvements. Next question is, how will inundation impact the proposed landscaping and tree plantings with this precluding plantings? Once we get to that point of design, anything we're proposing will be tolerant of the coastal conditions. It will withstand intermittent water inundation periods. Basically, if there is periods of long-standing water permanent inundation, which would not favorable for this parking area, then that would be a whole different species of plantings, but we're not proposing that be inundated for a long time. So the intermittent flooding can happen, will not impact these trees because they can handle the coastal conditions, whether it's from a tree down to a shrub or ornamental grasses. So we'll get that through design, but they can handle the coastal conditions. How will raising the parking lot impact positively or negatively the boat ramp needs to be done? Is it possible to work meaning the boat ramp will be less substantial by raising the elevation of the lot? In general, if we raise the parking lot, it's going to have a relatively positive impact on the boat ramp. Basically, as you have a slope of a line, if we raise the elevation of the parking lot, we're naturally increasing the slope of that line by holding the bottom point of the boat ramp. So the parking lot's here, we raise it, inherently it's going to be beneficial. Now, does it preclude us doing anything else? No, it's just saying that it would help the cause, but as we are going to redesign, we're going to fix it anyways. So whether we're filling the parking lot or not, that's our mission is to improve the boat ramp. So.
I'm sorry, could you elaborate as to why an increased slope helps?
So currently the boat ramp is about 9%, I believe, which is not beneficial to launching a boat. It's too shallow of a slope.
Okay, just so everybody has that clear.
Yeah, so the need is to increase it about 12%, 11.5 to 12%.
Raise it by or to?
To increase the slope from
Increase the slope.
6
to?
to, yes.
You said by, okay, you want
Yes,
to
so
clarify.
increasing it, thus giving a stronger slope for launching.
Easier to
more
launch,
beneficial.
perfect.
So that's the mission of the project. That happens whether we're raising the parking lot or not. That's part of the mission. This one I'm going to defer to Devin to kind of handle through.
Yeah, this question was on stability of the beach, and I'll just start by saying the motion of sand by water is tricky business indeed. And one of the great legends in the coastal engineering industry is Albert Einstein's son wanted to go, he told his dad, go study coastal engineering and how sand's going to move. And Albert Einstein said, that's not a solvable problem. His son went to become a great PhD in coastal engineering, so he did advance that knowledge. But the study of it it's a bit statistical. How sand moves with water is going to be based on three things move it. Alien transport, wind blowing the sand, currents running up and down, but primarily waves. Waves are the prime driver. Wind drives those waves, storms drives those winds, and what directionality those storms are coming is really going to dictate what happens with your beach. So when we look at stability, there are complex mathematical models that we can run, and even if we are running those, we look at things historically. We look at aerial photos, we look at exposure and things like that could give us some confidence in how a beach may respond. So when we looked at this, there's a few things that jumped out at us. One, we have two terminal groins, stone jetties near the southwest portion of the property, and one kind of locks in the beach on the west side of the Good Wives River side, and the other locks the beach in on the south side, or the one facing the sound. If we can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
As I said, prime driver for sediment transport is really the waves. The waves, again, generated by the wind. What you're looking at here is a windrows from Sikorsky Airport, and that gives you frequency of wind and wind speed all around the compass rose. And what you can see there is winds blow predominantly in some western quadrant, southwest up to northwest or to north. Winds out of the east are more rare. So if we look at our site, you can go to the next slide. This is looking at the slice of pie that's kind of the exposure for wind-driven waves at the beach site, and that same slice of pie is superimposed over the windrows. And again, when we're looking at these things and trying to go with our eyes open and see what we see, it's not a big slice. It does not pick up a lot of wind in that directionality. We're protected by Long Neck Point for everything out of the east from north, almost all the way to south, swinging around to the east. We're protected on the other shore of Goodwise River from most of the things out of the west. So we do have this narrow sliver out of the southwest that isn't driving a lot of the wind or wind generated waves. So that gives us some confidence and stability. So if we go to the next slide.
So just to interpret, by looking at this, the longer the band, the stronger the wind, or the stronger the frequency of winds.
The longer the band, the
Yeah.
more frequency, the more frequent the wind is in that direction. The color of the band speaks
Indicates
to
the velocity.
Velocity, yeah.
Miles per hour. So we take this sliver, which is right here, and we look at where the strongest
Yeah.
wind speed, that's actually coming in this direction, right? So if it's going over land, it has more obstructions to being a swift wind. It's not going to happen.
It's not going to generate waves.
But-
It doesn't, it's not building up a long enough fetch to generate waves.
Because this being open sea, just for simple terms, is that you
Yeah.
have that wind gets a lot of velocity.
We have a
to
seven or 8 mile fetch to Long Island in that slice of pie.
Yeah.
So we can get wind-driven waves that would have the ability to move sediment about, but only in that one slice of pie. When you end up with more exposed beaches that are just an open coast that can have winds from 180 degrees, and here's where you see significant sediment transport. If you have a beach that's, just say it runs from east to west, but you have prevailing southwesterly winds, your sediment's going to over time just move to the east as driven by the waves. But here we don't have that. We have potentially almost only directly onshore, offshore attack, not longshore attack. So we don't have the ability for a lot of waves because of that narrow slice of pie. And again, like I said, we look at these things through a lot of different lenses, and the thing that we looked at next is
Before you go on, is there an explanation for what might be ameliorating, like the intensity and the frequency of kind of wind in that pie? Since it's coming off the sound, the harbor, what is it that kind of makes this section of the pie a little
it's
different?
frequency, not velocity. So the smaller bits, it's not blowing that direction very often. We're in a belt of westerly trade winds or southwesterly
I see.
trade winds.
Got it.
So our common wind direction, mostly the summer months, has some component of west
I
or
see.
south of west. And our storms tend to be northerly, or our biggest breezes are usually easterly, but they're not very frequent. They're strong and intense, but short-lived.
Got it.
May I ask a question, just sort of follow up, then picking up on the presentation last time with what we're anticipating is increased flooding and our conversation about 12 or 24. That conversation has no impact upon this aspect of the
No,
beach.
very, very different discussions.
Okay, good. I just want to clarify that more
Yeah.
flooding doesn't mean less beach.
Well, the higher the tides are, the narrower the beach will be. As the tides come up, your dry beach width will get progressively narrower.
Okay, maybe we'll talk about that then
Yeah,
next.
just to clarify, I mean, I asked a question, I guess, and it was rephrased a little bit just to clarify for Devin's purposes, but basically what I was trying to understand is like, what is unique about this particular, is there something unique about this beach that's contributed to its longevity?
Yeah,
And will protect it over time? In other words, are we going through this whole exercise only to find out that there's something kind of wacky here and 10 years from now the beach is gone? And I think what we're getting is some confirmation here that that may not be the case for all the kind of the aspects that Devin is explaining to us.
There's a number of things that lead me to say that there's some stability here.
Yeah.
Now, sea level rise is another discussion. The beach is going underwater progressively, just much like the parking lot's going underwater progressively. But that's not what we're talking about. It's stability of erosion. Just the next slide goes into stability of erosion. This is analysis done by Deep under the Sea Grant that just looks at shoreline change along the coast of Connecticut. Bars sticking out to the bottom are erosion, and bars sticking out to the top are accretion, or where sand's being built. You can see in Darien, there's really small bars. The coast of Darien, basically by this sea grant analysis, they're saying it's very stable from either erosion or accretion. It hasn't moved very much.
So just for reference, what are these municipalities? Do you remember? It's alphabetical, I think, right?
What's that?
It's alphabetical, I think. From left to right, I think.
No, I think it's along.
Greenwich.
Left to
what's
right,
first?
so we're looking at.
Stanford, yes,
Yeah.
going up the coast.
Right.
Greenwich, Stanford, Darien, Norwalk.
You can see old lines.
Yeah, so it's somewhere out in the eastern part of the state. Sorry.
So for perspective is very small accretion, very relative limited erosion, relative, and this is Darien right here where it's, actually results were that there was no.
It's saying there's
erosion
not
relative,
too much change.
Well, because we have
If you look at it
we have Long
relative to
Island.
the rest of the coast.
And you go out, then you've lost Long Island as
Yeah, you don't have.
the gut, yeah.
You don't have that block from what the wind patterns and.
Right.
Well, this is confirming what we had heard from Danielle Missel at Deep. She had indicated kind of at a cursory level that from aerial photographs, which I know you're going to talk about here, that we're actually picking up sand over time as opposed to losing.
Yeah, I'd say very, very modestly.
If I read that correctly, it says that in Darien, the shoreline has moved 0.01 meters a year, which is essentially 3/8 of an inch.
I'd call that zero.
Yeah.
For the purpose of the way this analysis gets done through aerial photos, it's difficult to determine, but I'd say it lends credence to the stability which is going to be supported on the next slide through the aerial photo review. So, next slide, those are aerial photos, 34, 51, 71, 2018. We didn't have enough time to scale things and get them exactly over the top of each other, but from the landmarks you can see the road in the later photos, the 71 and 18. You can see the parking lot itself. The shape is very static, and that's for something. Beaches are very ephemeral; they move all the time. This is not showing that the case. This is, even for a beach, seems to be very, very static.
So maybe I would just sum up once again, since it's kind of answering the question. It seems to me like what this is kind of acknowledging is that, we're not at risk here of, the town is not at risk of potentially contemplating making an investment in something that's going to go away as a result of kind of the natural properties associated with it.
I wouldn't say. Yeah. You're not on a barrier island. You're not. We were looking at a job for a client out in the Cape where the barrier beach breached, and all of a sudden this marina that was protected by the barrier beach was now exposed to waves generated from Portugal. So a very dramatic shift, and one that could be foreseen because you could see the breach in the barrier beach moving seasonally. Here, when we open our eyes and look at that sort of stuff, we don't see that. A barrier beach is a good example of something you could see massive change. Katama Bay in Martha's Vineyard of Edgartown, that barrier beach breached, and then things changed dramatically in the bay. You wouldn't want to build permanent infrastructure right in that barrier beach. It could be subject to
Gotcha. Thank you.
The next questions all kind of run together, but first is relationship, when we discuss the relationship between the building, its current proposed locations, and discuss kind of how it relates to the parking lots. It's very similar, and can we discuss, show the water inundation around the building itself, and finally, will the water come to the building using their assumptions? So we took a snapshot on this next slide to illustrate the same map we showed last time. The map on the left is showing this conditions with a 12-inch sea level rise. And the map on the right, snapshot, shows the proposed conditions with a 12-inch sea level rise. And as you can see, which I think we discussed in the past, is that the one corner showing the yellow through a little bit of the red, existing and proposed, shows both. And I think we've been aware of that. That is very similar to where the coastal jurisdiction limit is, which we know is a 5.5 elevation. So as of right now, we're knowing that most of this is high and dry. There's a little bit of that is having inundation around the perimeter of the structure,
Well, just the yellow parts, the frequency of the water getting that high is 1 to 2 times a month. And at the very lightest yellow, less than 1 time a month. But you can see that, you know, so this is the existing building. This is the bathroom component. This is the concession component. You see that, you know, a couple times a month with a 12-inch sea level rise, you're going to get water basically surrounding the building and possibly even getting inside. So, and then, of course, with the proposed new building, the same thing would happen, except this is lifted up at the water.
The next question was, if the data presented is used to support the raise in the parking lot, how does this influence the decision to renovate current buildings or construct a new raised structure? The one baseline, as I mentioned, the elevations at the existing buildings are at 7.9. Doing work in the parking lot does not change that 7.9 as to which we're holding for any of the structures. So in theory, they can work on 2 parallel tracks. They work well together, but they're not reliant upon each other, I guess is what I should say. Now, from a constructability standpoint, efficiency standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to do them together, just from a product standpoint. When you're building a building, they need staging, they need laydown area, which naturally is going to disturb a parking lot. We can't help it when they lay steel down, lay wood down, have porta johns, it just disturbs the site. So you're going to have to replace some of that parking lot probably from a constructability of the building standpoint, but they don't rely on each other to have each other needed because of we're holding 7.9 and the parking lot will blend within those grades, whether it's existing or proposed. The next question is, what is the expected life before likely significant repair of a 24-inch rise? The parking lot, is weather a meaningful factor? The basis of this is that no 2 parking lots are the same. They go under different weather factors, different setting factors, different uses. So we can't compare 2 exactly the same. Now, but what we can say is that a parking lot that is constructed well, that has a good subbase, good asphalt section, good pitch for stormwater, good design, and good maintenance over a period of time. So whether it's swept, it's sealed on a regular basis, the integrity of asphalt is maintained, all those factors lead to a longer lifespan of a parking lot. Think of your driveway. I personally grew up on a hill. I knew that growing up, my parents paved the driveway. It was in really good shape for the first couple of years. Then they told me to go seal it for them. And I would say, why? Say, because we want to make sure the asphalt stays intact. So you sweep it every year, you seal it every other year. So that gives a layer, not just cosmetic of the black surface, but really it's holding the asphalt together for a longer period of time. Eventually that sealant wears away and it gets so rough that you can't just seal anymore. You just have to take it out and replace it. So that happened before I went to college, benefit of my parents. So about 21 years was our driveway just from growing up. Now, that's very similar to a parking lot. Now, in a municipality where you have the ability to sweep, you can maintain, you can seal it. You may have different pitches of parking lot. Catch basins are a factor within public parking lots. So we can design to handle stormwater so it doesn't pond and sit and wear away your asphalt over a short period of time. So with that, it comes down to design and maintenance because they work hand in hand as the longevity of the project, of the improvements. There's some factors that are beneficial to the overall project with respect to sea level rise. As we know before, Devin's pointed out that there's minimal changes to the shoreline within the park area. That is beneficial. So with stability outside the parking lot, that's going to lead to some stability around the parking lot. So the more that the water crashes and hits a hard surface of the parking lot, that inherently is going to deteriorate the parking lot faster than if it's stable, as Devin's showing, that we have that buffer that's protecting our parking lot area. The terminal groins, as Devin mentioned, those are a man-made feature that is also inherently protecting the shoreline stability, which then leads to protecting the parking lot itself as well. And it goes to the building as well. So it's not just a parking lot, but inherently the factors of the beach area are protecting the greater park peninsula that's out there for all the resources and all the features. The next is talking about the following physical characteristics contribute to the deterioration of Pear Beach with respect to sea level rise. The grade in the beach is about 7.0. Parking lot is 5 to 7, varying. Now these are about 3.6 above mean high water. So as sea level rises, yes, inundation into the parking lot will occur more often. So if the parking lot is higher and drier, it's going to have fewer frequency of flooding events, is the benefit of raising the parking lot, which leads to more stable and less deterioration of the parking lot itself. We mentioned
Part of the question was, if we're looking to solve for 30 years, are we really solving for 30 years? In other words, are we going to have to make a major change 15 or 20 years in anyway?
Yeah. I think from looking at the sea level rise projections that we are been showing last meeting, is that we're within the timeline that it would be a suitable solution to raise a parking lot, to not have to redo the parking lot within 30 years, just for perspective.
Great, thank you.
Anything else?
I'm sorry, can I just clarify with point number 1 there, that I want to make sure that we're not solving to have a dry parking lot and losing a beach. So I want to make sure point number 1, I know we were sort of just addressed that before, but this water is not eroding our beach.
The wave action, wind action is not deteriorating the shoreline, is not reducing the shoreline, thus reducing the expanse of the beach from what we have seen thus far.
Yeah, I think the only thing is some consideration of the edge of the parking lot, if you're elevating the parking lot, to not end up with a vertical wall without some manner of scour protection or wave breaking.
So proposed to date is we actually expand the expanse of the beach area.
Right.
Moving the edge of the parking lot back. And by doing that, of holding the same grade of the beach would be at the same grade, so we can hold the natural grade to the edge of the parking lot. So when water's rising, it's encountering the same conditions as it is today, just I guess in simple terms. But since we're hearing that there is less, the beach is not changing too much.
Right.
It's stable, more or less. That's just handling as to where the wave action interacts with the parking lot itself at the edge of the curb or where the asphalt and beach meet. That protection is important, but that will mostly be subgrade, just to make sure that we don't have under scour or under reduction of the sand in that. So, I guess long story, it's stable.
Okay.
And we're expanding the beach actually, making it larger.
Perfect. Thank you.
Next question is basically, can you give me a ballpark cost as to the 12-inch and 24-inch raising of the parking area? We don't have the design complete yet. We don't have cost at this point, but we will. We're looking to get some clarification from DEEP We're hoping that that's our next interaction with them as to what would be acceptable or what their opinions are beyond what response we got back so far. And once we actually have design, then we can do quantity takeoffs, which leads to a cost estimate to give you an idea of what those costs are. As mentioned, every parking lot's a bit different. Currently we have 2 catch basins. We have one option that may have 6. We may have 8, depending on how we actually work the slopes, drive some of the catch basins, and thus thickness of the asphalt and the fill. So
don't answer this if you're not confident with an answer, okay? Don't feel like you have to answer it. But let's say you go to deep on, let's say we ask you guys to go to deep. And I'm trying to think of a kind of an easy way to phrase it. Let's say you go to deep on March 1st, and they say, great, go to 24 or whatever the number is they come back with. How long from getting that information would it be before you could come back to the committee with an estimate? In other words, simply stated, how long does it take to put an estimate together once you understand the answer to the question that you had here?
yeah, about 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
We haven't designed anything.
No,
that's the biggest thing.
Right,
So
so you're saying it's 2 to 3 weeks to basically take that information, work it into a design,
Yeah.
and come up with some estimates.
yeah, it's really the factors, what they accept, and how we've penciled in a concept so far. How is that different? How is it the same? And once you have that, then knowing what's the difference between the elevation of the proposed versus existing to get our volume of
Yeah,
material.
no, that's great. It's a lot better than saying 2 to 3 months. So.
Yeah. And we're at concept level, so things can fluctuate and change naturally as we design, but getting the answer from them is really critical for us to know what they're going to accept and move forward.
It just,
Well, I mean, what are you going to go in with, 24 inches? I mean, that's ideal, I would say, over the
it's-
long term.
It starts as a conversation with them. So we have inquired so far as to what they would accept, and they've noted that 12 inches is what they typically accept, but there's no hard and fast rule. So we likely may go with pencil of 2 versions, and going to a term analyses of the benefits of what we're showing them, so that they can understand where we're coming at from the entire project, not just as we want to fill. That never works. So by showing here are the possible solutions, and here's the pros and cons, and here how this is beneficial to other factors within the project, that's a conversation we have to have with them. And that isn't going to be a straight line. Likely we have a conversation, and they have to discuss internally and go through any other processes at the state, and then get back with a formal answer, hopefully within a week after our meeting.
Yeah, but if I understood from our last session with you guys, we're not talking about, even if we were talking about 24 inches, we're not talking about 24 inches consistently throughout the entire parking lot, right? It's kind of,
yeah,
Yeah.
we talked
varying.
we talked about that last week. I think you got to make it really clear that the 24 inches is sort of like an average, and
Yeah.
and you're not
Yeah.
going to look at the existing site and add 2 feet
Oh, totally.
everywhere on the
Yes.
existing site.
Right.
So saying we're raising the parking lot 2
Yeah.
feet really is,
It's not a true statement, I
it's
guess.
not a, it's
Yeah,
not
we
a
need
true
to change
statement.
that.
And the first thing that's going to show up in the paper is they're going
Right.
to raise the parking lot 6 feet, with some 2 feet dips in it, so.
Well, are you raising it 24 inches from the lowest point and then obviously level?
Yeah, so all the grades are feather out. So at the deepest point may be 24 or 18, and the average may be 6, maybe 8, but feathers, because that low point's at the 4.2,
Right.
and we're going to basically try to hold that elevation along the beach edge, because we're trying to hold the grade of the beach. So as we feather those grades out, we're working the grades around and working the pitch of the stormwater. That would give us how much fill is within the coastal jurisdiction limit. So deepest maybe 24, but we have to have a conversation about what is the rest within their purview.
Have you done a project like this in any other location?
With these same conditions, no.
Well, not the same, but
Yeah.
I mean, a waterfront parking elevation.
The reviews can vary considerably. I think Devin can attest to this, where it can be fairly subjective, it can be fairly about the context, that there isn't a straight
Yeah, it's not too often the coastal jurisdiction line comes up on a parking lot. It's kind of rare. More of what we're doing is elevating coastal structures, revetments or seawalls, and then the associated grading behind it, whatever that may be. But that's typically higher than CJL. They have pushed back on elevation of those coastal structures, and they used to say, well, 24 inches under a COP is good, and they said 12 inches under a COP. Now they're saying no raising under a COP. So there's a lot of subjectivity to these determinations, which is why I think the approach of going up there, and with some education as to what we're doing here, because at the end of the day, there's no impact to coastal resources. The only impact to coastal resources is beneficial, because we're actually growing
That's our
beach.
objective.
Yeah. So on the western side, beach is increased.
Right.
The pavement elevation does not impact resources one or the other.
Well, in fact, it supports the extension of the beach. In other words, if we were to extend the beach 18 feet without raising the parking lot, it remains the pitch of the existing beach.
Yeah.
And when you get a 4.2 tide, your additional 18 feet floods also.
Just disappears.
So in essence, raising of the park, I mean, I'm not trying to make the argument to you, but it seems to me like raising the parking lot actually supports kind of the improvement of the extension of the beach in a way that, I don't know, that makes sense to you.
I think so. I wouldn't want to over or undersell that point. I think that the primary point is the parking lot edge is moving landward. That movement landward is going to create additional resource of the beaches. So that component is important.
Less impervious area.
And we want to do that because of rising tide levels. We
Yeah.
want to increase the size of the beach.
Yes.
Particularly the west. I'm sitting here wondering, why do we want to touch the south beach and take away a little, we lose a little bit of parking, but why extend that 8 feet? I mean, I can see the side beach, which is at high tides gets very narrow, but I'm
Right.
wondering what's the benefit in the south beach?
I don't know, because I don't know the actual where those lines fall.
Okay.
Yeah, we were looking overall to go back 6-8 months, right? We had other landscape features in those areas. We were blocking the proximity between the parking lot and the beach. On the west side, we did that. There was those raised sand features that we removed. So that brought that curb line back. And as we're treating that side, we're doing the same thing on the south beach, where we would bring back that curb line. We're adding beach as beneficial. We could have some landscaping into the area. So that's where that side came from. The idea of that, moving that curb line.
I'm sorry. Could you take a step back and perhaps just clarify what jurisdiction DEEP has as to our decision?
Yeah, so I think we have the coastal jurisdiction limit.
No, I mean, as far as 12 versus 24, we've been,
Yeah.
are they going to tell us, or do we have discretion? I'm not clear as to what DEEP's actual jurisdiction is on that matter.
They will have to issue a permit to work within the coastal jurisdiction limit, and that will be prescriptive to say you shall not fill greater than XYZ inches.
So they're going to come back and just tell us?
That's where the challenge lies, that it is somewhat arbitrary.
Okay.
And we can come up with numbers of examples on things where they haven't allowed any fill, or things where they've allowed 4 feet of fill. And where that falls is a lot of their determination. We can say, well, in this example, why
Right, build your case.
There? We just did a project for the town of Fairfield, who was a beach nourishment project. We moved like 30,000 yards of sand and elevated the beach probably 3 or 4 feet in various areas, and moved mean-high water and CJL out waterward 20 and 30 feet. And that was all under certificate of permission. In my wildest dreams, I didn't think they would authorize it under that, but they did.
Well, that's good. That's
It's
good.
good.
Okay.
Devin, where was it?
It was Jennings Beach in Fairfield.
Got it.
that was hydraulically dredged, so it was material dredged from the channel and pumped onto the beach.
So that was answering to most questions we received thus far. Our suggestion on next steps, I think one is to have a decision to authorize us to meet with Deep to have a further conversation with them, to discuss raising the parking lots, to know if that can move forward. Once we do meet with them, report back on their determination and prepare a plan and cost estimate to the liking of the committee. And basically that drives us to what will be acceptable when we go for permitting. Those are next steps in our minds that we need answers to. But I'll open up to.
And how definitive an answer are you going to get from Deep? In other words, are they going to say, maybe we'll let you do 24? You know, or are they going to say, yeah, I like that 24?
What do we expect they're going to say?
Well, what I'm saying is how much ambiguity will be.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get a sense for what.
I think they're going to be pretty clear.
I was going to
as
say,
to saying,
they're going to give you a permit, and your permit says X.
No, they're not going to give you a permit before you do all this design
yeah,
work.
in the conversation we have with them, I think they're going to be pretty clear.
Okay.
It depends how much of a dance it is. Sometimes it depends on how much you as the end user may want to push for a particular position versus take their knee-jerk position. But we are going to be embarking on something that doesn't have hard and fast rules. The 12-inch or 24-inch is not prescribed by statute, so it is going to be some level of back and forth.
Can you talk a bit more about the process, like in terms of the iterations? Like, I guess what I'm understanding is, back to kind of Frank's point, you'll go with a preliminary plan that's enough to give them a sense of what we're trying to accomplish. That will be the basis for an initial conversation, and like it could go a couple of ways. It sounds like one way might be forget it, it's a non-starter, or it could they can go back and tell you at that stage, okay, that sounds interesting, come back to us with a more detailed plan? Is that kind of what?
It could go that way, and I don't want to speak to this in specifically, but
I'm not trying to suggest we have a crystal ball.
Generally,
just trying to understand a little bit more.
Generally, we like to go up there with our preferred option. Sometimes not confuse them with various options, and say, here's what we've considered. But go there with a strong justification for a preferred option. And I think that's where we stand right here now in front of this group is, what is the preferred option and how hard do you want the design team to fight for that preferred option? Because it could be a little pulling and tugging right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And there are a number of factors that go into there that aren't necessarily technical. They're how the project's perceived, how much support it has.
So I guess maybe to kind of nail it down a bit, based upon the analysis that Craig walked us through last week, there's solutions for various different scenarios in terms of our response to sea level rise, right? And I guess that leaves us with either 12 to 24s, right? It's not 12 or 24, it's 12 to 24. Just to remind us as to why, like how we ended up with the 24 number. Was that 24 was based upon Craig's analysis, and I realize it's not here, but if you can help us understand this, remind me. Craig's analysis as to kind of the level that would be at that would satisfy kind of protecting us against the...
They'll go back to Craig's analysis of the number of occurrences of inundation that would be problematic for those various elevations, and then doing that again with the sea level rise scenario.
Got it.
So it was not...
and it was capped as to what our
road edge was.
Yeah, the grades that would kind of stop us from being higher than the road.
Kind of reference points.
Oh, right, we didn't want it higher than the road. Remember,
Exactly.
that came up, right?
That was kind of like the stopping point, more or less.
That makes sense,
And
yeah.
what grades work
Yep.
within the parking lot to give positive
Got it.
pitch to base
Got it.
speed.
Okay, so I'd love to stay and chat all night. But I'm wondering if, maybe at this stage, we feel we have enough to simply tell these guys to kind of make an appointment with Hartford and deep in Hartford and,
I make a motion that the committee take a vote to grant them permission to move to Hartford as our next step.
Do we need to give them a plan? As you say, you want to go with a plan and go strong? Do we need to fine tune it a little bit
think
more?
That's their job.
Yeah, I think the question you just asked, 12 or 24.
Right.
Devin, sorry, that's right, get it right?
Yeah.
Sorry, basically said, we're going to kind of sit down and chat and kind of feel them out a little bit.
Okay.
Ideally, we want 24, but, the state's going to be the ones that are going to
Yeah,
accept
I guess
it.
that's the question, is do you want, they've already said 12 inches, pretty much, through your dialogue with Danielle.
I think.
So I think you as a committee are kind of, do you take that and run, or do you send us up there to advocate for
I think,
a solution that has some more longevity?
well,
That's
exactly that. I think, I think we'd like to.
You answered the question for us.
Yeah, I think we'd like to think that we're doing
We
this.
just want to hear that from you.
No, I think we need to tell, yeah, we haven't said that to them, I don't think,
So
yeah.
let me try, and then you guys tell me if I got this right. I think our objective here would be, if we're gonna do this, let's do it once and have it last as long as it possibly can, so that some other building committee 35 years from now doesn't have to go through this again.
Yeah.
So I think what we're saying is we'd like this solution to have the greatest longevity. In other words, we want to get the biggest bang for the buck out of the investment we're making also.
So I think that's.
On an economic basis. So I think we'd like it to be as much as they will allow us within the constraints of the site, I guess,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not an unlimited thing. We're not
There
asking
are
for
limits
52
to the
feet of
site.
it.
And I think then we should design something that is an ideal solution, given those limits. And start by presenting that to Dee
Yeah.
and explaining why, the team came up with this particular design.
So does that-
I think we
yeah.
have a lot of strength in that argument. and see what they say.
So with that in mind, I guess, I'm sorry, Martha.
Well, I'm just curious, I mean, is the work been done already, the analysis that you presented to us? And, I mean, are you going to have to do more design work before you go to them, or have you got basically everything you need
We
at
have
this
the
point?
background analyses done, we have sketches of what the concept art, we have to clean those up. We have to prepare a document that, run them, that's worked out. So we have drafts, we've sketched things.
But this is, you're talking about the parking lot only, is that correct?
Going to parking lot.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have things put together, but we need to clean up. We need to work out some.
Just to know how much work
Yeah,
it was.
so, is it gonna take a month? No, it's gonna take probably a week, but it's gonna take at least a week to get a meeting with them.
I was going to say, you're not going to be, you're not going to be there Friday.
Yeah, no, last time it took us a month to get a meeting.
I guess the flip side of it is what I'm trying to understand is, do you need any more from us to take that step? And do we need any more from them to authorize them to take that step? And I feel as though we have enough information.
I
They
agree.
may have a little more homework to do and kind of polish some things up, but I don't think there's anything more we can contribute as a building committee.
They're the experts.
Yeah.
So let the experts use their expertise and
Yeah, and I think we're at a kind of critical path item here, like, our decisions around, whether we can make decisions around going forward beyond this is really based upon getting an understanding of cost and other implications and timing and,
Yeah, I mean-
so,
we can get permission. If we can't afford to build it, then we can go back in and
exactly, yeah.
say, well, can we go, 18 inches instead of 24 or something because of the cost
Just to,
difference.
add some perspective here, and I would say go for 24.
Yeah.
But I understand Roten Point considered raising their parking lot. It's about an acre, has a seawall, but they have flooding at times. And they were going to raise it 12 inches, and they never went for permits or anything. But the initial price came in at over $3 million, and they were able to knock it down to a little under $3 million, but they decided in the end the cost benefit wasn't there.
Yeah, yeah.
Just to,
Yeah.
just so you have some
Yeah,
rough, and every parking lot I understand is different, and different
Yeah.
structures and everything.
Yeah, but
I imagine it's not inexpensive, to put it that way.
I wouldn't think.
Yeah, I think we could all safely say it's
Yeah.
not inexpensive.
Right.
Anybody who's done a driveway knows it's,
Yeah.
so back to, I guess, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Can we clarify the motion again? I'm sorry.
But the motion is to allow the architect and firms to meet with Deep to work out an agreement for a 24-inch rise in the parking lot.
Okay, I think I'm comfortable with
You
that.
good, yeah?
I'll second.
All in favor? Okay,
Anybody
great.
against?
Yeah, so Krista seconded and we've got a unanimous. Okay, so that's great. So I guess you'll keep us posted. We have a meeting scheduled for the 25th. I guess we can just kind of play it by ear and see what type of, an update.
No rush.
Yeah.
No, I didn't mean it in that context, but having said that, get this thing over with
No,
already.
we're having estimates for the 26th.
I've been at it
Permit,
for so
John.
long, people
Do you
confuse
think-
me with Bernie Sanders.
Do you think
know,
there'd
so
be,
it's like-
I guess at some point, maybe they draw the line in the sand, so to speak, whether you can do this under a COP or whether we'd have to have a full-blown hearing?
Yeah, I think they will, and a lot of times when it goes that way, that they kind of say, look, we're going to give this to you under COP. If you want to go more, you have to go for a full permit.
Okay.
But, by the way, we're not going to issue that full permit. We're going to kick you back to COP, so you might as well take the COP and run.
Taking just,
I'm sorry for the newbies here, COP is
Certificate of permission, it's an abbreviated.
Certificate.
permit.
certificate of permission.
permission. Thank
So
you.
it's an abbreviated regulatory process, has a set clock. So it has a 90-day set clock. It doesn't have public notice requirements. So there is a pretty big fork in the road that comes if you can fit something under COP or if you need to go to full permit, of how you decide to go about that.
Okay.
So in other words, they give you a decision within 90 days?
Yes, on the certificate of permission.
90 days from, I guess, the formal application.
90 days from the formal submittal, and they've been adding more and more pre-application requirements. So it's getting more and more challenging to get that formal submittal in.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you guys very, very much. Appreciate it. So I guess with that, if we're okay, the next item on our agenda is public comment. So I know we have some members of the public with us. If anybody would like to, please, just once again, you have to come up, just state your name. Yeah.
Point Road.
Yeah.
I actually have questions. I know you can't answer my questions. That's fine, but I'm going to say them anyway.
We'll try.
I guess I'm trying to understand the conversation about raising the parking lot. I know it's not a consistent 24 everywhere, but when you talked about the level of the road is not a static level from one end to the other. So I'm a little confused about that conversation and how raising the parking lot particularly impacts that dip in the road that's at the entrance, which is also the bottom of my driveway. So that's sort of the question. I don't quite understand how that works. And then my other question is, I know that you said that you will make sure that there's no impact on the neighborhood with drainage and water flow and all that. And I'm just, again, curious how you handle that issue and what happens if what you do doesn't work and there is an impact on the neighborhood. What recourse do the neighbors have?
Do you have an answer to this?
So I can go back to the initial plan that shows the grades.
Thank you.
So elevations, catch basin 4.2 by the sand. Catch basin in the parking lot of the beach is 4.9. The elevation at the driveway entrance, right by the guard shack, is 6.0, approximately, right by here. Now, as you mentioned, the road has varying elevations where from this point higher, it goes up. I think it ends around 11.0 or so. On this side, it goes up to a little crown and then back down to this lower spot here. So yes, the road has a natural dip in this location. From this point at the guard shack, it goes higher across the street, which if you're in these properties, you're higher than the road. Correct.
Well, yeah, not the base of the driveway, but.
Sure, yeah,
it
so
slopes up.
your driveway, wherever it is, it ties in at grade of the road, and the residences and properties are higher than that. So at this 6.0 or 6.5, approximately in this general area, as we're designing, we're holding this grade as a high point, where as we're working through where water flows through the parking lot to various catch basins, there won't be a point as which it's higher here and water is shedding towards the road. We're holding this elevation and capturing water within our parcel and not discharging anything into the roadway itself.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, it just seems natural that we might want to understand if we need to make a recommendation as a building committee, even though it's kind of outside of our purview and we're now on the road.
Sure.
If we want to make a recommendation to evaluate doing something if that situation that you described is not an ideal situation with that dip.
And once we get designed, we will understand as to what happens here and how may it work into the road.
Right.
As in a positive benefit for
I'm
the
not
road.
saying the town would kind of embark on that, but I'm just saying I think we might want to, right, if we're doing it, anyway.
If we're doing improvements, yeah, where that line is of influence into the road. But the biggest thing I'm saying is that the area within this parking lot can't shed into the road. We're capturing within catch basins here and others to discharge at this point. And what point I was making is that, yes, the road is a dip here, so all the water that collects within the road here discharges out. From this point on, comes back and discharges out here as well. This storm drain system is catching more than just our parking lot. It's catching a part of the road as well.
So just to make sure I'm understanding this, you talked about the park driveway at 6, and our lowest point is 4.2. So we really can't quite raise it 24. Is that, I mean?
No, we can.
But, okay.
It's so when you design a parking lot, it's not a flat pancake everywhere.
Okay.
It's actually a series of small ponds, if you want to think of it. They're self-enclosed. So around this catch basin may be a low spot, so water from here sheds here. But with a catch basin here, have a high point to a low point, high point to low point. So we actually have these little pods that collect water versus the open valley where water hits and it all goes to one drain. All goes to one drain. So we can actually have low to high to low to high. So it actually, you think of it doing this, you may not see that until you actually look really close and see that there's elevation changes within a flat parking lot. Every parking lot you drive now has that.
That's interesting.
In the time when this was constructed, it was just sheet flowed off and sent it to these two drains. Sheet flow all this down here or going down the boat ramp and call it a day.
So you would have many more catch basins around the parking lot.
That's the more current way of designing stormwater, is that you don't rely on the long sheet flow across the parking lot. Results in deterioration because the longer water is on the asphalt, the longer it has to get into the crevices and wear around with the asphalt. So we would treat water more localized and then discharge out to a central outlet. In most cases, that's the concept we're working through right now.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question on, I'm sorry, just to make sure I understand it straight, that there's no way to do this just by increasing catch basins without raising the parking lot?
No.
Okay,
No.
I mean, just,
Yeah, so.
I know it's sort of obvious, but I wanted to make sure I asked.
How it's designed right now is you have a high point out here, I think it's like, I'm guessing 7 point something in this high point.
Okay.
And it sheet flows down. You see the contour here, there's another one that mirrors. It sheet flows down and finds its way down to these two catch basins. By putting a catch basin here or one here, all that's doing is possibly collecting whatever might flow into that catch basin of this area here.
Right.
And one that's this location.
Right.
It's not really resolving any of the flooding here because that is still 4.2.
Yeah, but Dan, I think, back to Kristen's question, kind of the genesis of all this is to deal with sea level rise, right? So if you go back to the heat map,
Yeah.
essentially leaving the parking lot where it is and just putting more catch basins in,
Yeah.
all of those catch basins will be overwhelmed by
Yeah.
kind of
Everything within this
additional
line.
elevation and tides.
That would be my guess, but I think I just wanted to articulate it because we know we have an expense coming with the parking lot and the asphalt aspect, so I just wanted to articulate that adding more catch basins, I don't know what that.
Doesn't resolve.
Doesn't help us.
No, doesn't
Okay,
resolve.
thank you.
Devin,
Now,
anything?
in terms of the question about recourse of
Did you
the
wanna add
community,
anything, I'm sorry. No, I was asking Devin if you wanted to add anything.
just recourse of the community, I don't know the town standards for if there were flood events on Pear Tree Beach Road, that's what the recourse of the community is.
Why don't we-
I can't
we
speak to
can
that.
come back to that at a later
Yeah.
point, I think.
I just want to address the question.
Okay, I'm sure we'll be talking about this much greater depth as we go along here. Any other questions? Please.
I had a question.
Yes.
Susie Bailey, Coach Land Lane. And I'm trying to get my logic around this, so bear with me. I understand the sea level change and how that is the reason for raising the parking lot. I guess where my logic is stuck is the flooding of the parking lot and why, in many ways, that has become the issue that it's become. I've lived here 30 years, and the parking lot has always flooded when there are storms or there are tides. And as best I know, it doesn't stop people from going to the beach or enjoying the park or the area. It dries out rather quickly. So I understand for sea level change that it does make sense so that we protect it. But my logic is getting stuck in, are we so focused on the flooding of the parking lot because we want to add 18 feet of beach and because we want a 2-story structure where we'll have rental space? That, to me, the concern for the flooding of the parking lot was if you're renting it and you have people coming in and parking and using the parking lot, you can't have the flooding there. So I'm just trying to understand what's driving the 2 feet requirement of the parking lot.
Yeah, so let me see if I can take a crack at it, and then my fellow committee members can help me here. So first off, I guess just to go back to the reason why we're here, how this all came about is, we're looking at what steps might be necessary to assure that this beach as a park, and as a very important amenity of the community, remains an accessible amenity over time. That's part of it, and that in fact came out of the master plan and was part of the initial sets of objectives. This particular conversation about the parking lot is, in my view, on one hand it can be linked, but in my view, I would suggest we look at it as completely independent of what we're talking about for the building. So what we're really talking about here is kind of a solution that assures that the community over time, recognizing now that we have a better understanding of how conditions will change with sea level rise, and we're getting a better understanding of kind of what's going on with that amenity in that park. It happens to be a beach, but it's a park. So we've now learned more, and we're understanding that, based upon what the data is telling us and the science is telling us and what NOAA is telling us, is that over time, that amenity will become less and less accessible. So to your point, what you've experienced over the many years that you've been going there is
I think we have every reason to believe that's going to change, and it's going to be changing at a rate that's much faster than anything anybody's experienced up until now. That's what we're being told, and that's a function of sea level rise. So that's what's brought us to this conversation. Once again, this comes out of the Parks and Recs Commission. Parks and Recs Commission, their principal aim is to assure that these amenities that we all benefit from are here. They're in the best possible condition that they can be in, given the resources that we have that we can dedicate to them, and that they're not in jeopardy of going away. So I think that is my view of why we're having this conversation. It has nothing to do, and I can stand corrected from my fellow members yet, it has nothing to do with accessibility to a new building. It has certainly even further nothing to do with accessibility to somebody who might be renting a space, if that's what the commission ultimately decides. That new building, if the town decides that we're going to build a new building, would be used for, it has nothing to do with that. So, we've been at it now for a while and we're learning. And, probably maybe one of the most important things that we've learned is that there's every reason to believe, and we're not unique in that respect, that maybe not this generation, but a next generation won't have the benefit of having access to the beach in the same way that, prior generations and we do. And I think one really important question the town's going to have to probably grapple with at some point is to decide, are we fixing it, or are we kind of kicking the can down the road for somebody else to fix it? It's as simple as that. So, but I don't know if that answers the question. It's a great question, and it needs to be clarified, and if it's not clear, we probably should spend more time clarifying, but at least that's my view of it, and I would just open it up to anybody else to, if they want to add anything, or if you guys feel I've gotten it.
Well, I think what Craig showed last week, or 2 weeks ago, whenever we met, and Devin can maybe help, but there's just based on the tide tables, no storms, no great big full moon, but based on the published tide tables, you're going to have an increasing number of episodes of the parking lot being flooded and being inaccessible as we go forward. Raising the beach helps alleviate the number of times you're going to see that. I don't remember exactly what the numbers was, but it's a significant difference in cutting down the number of times you won't be able to access that beach. That's the driving force behind doing something to the parking lot. And as Mike says, never mind the building. At this stage, it's got nothing to do with it. Does that help?
Yeah, I understood the sea level change.
Okay, because you can see that, and if you go back to 2 weeks ago, you can see Craig very clearly showed the number of events just based on tide charts, where you're going to see ponding at that lower catch basin, and the number of events where the tide comes higher than that, and the number of those events is going to increase, is predicted to increase over the next 10 to 15 years.
Yes, and that's understood. My only point was that it's been a natural occurrence all these years, and I understand it's
but
going
it's
to be
more frequent,
prevalent
and it's
more
going to
frequent.
get more
Yes.
frequent. So
And it usually just affects the West Beach.
well,
So that's
you
why
can't.
my
It
question.
affects the entrance to the parking lot. You can't get in the parking
Sure,
lot.
and
Nobody
when-
wants to drive in the parking lot in salt water.
Yeah.
So
Ultimately, and I agree, it's to ensure the future accessibility, but
Yeah.
somebody's going to have to do a cost-benefit
Oh,
trade-off
no question.
here.
Yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
And we'll
We'll
get
get
there,
there.
yeah.
But if I understood what you were saying, the water itself damages the parking lot, and if we have more frequency of water covering the parking lot, the lot itself is going to deteriorate at a
Faster rate.
faster.
You're already seeing
Right.
it, you're already seeing it
Yeah.
in the lot today.
So a lot's going to have to be dealt with anyway, as you said, driveways, parking lots, they
Think of like
do
how we
wear
have
out.
potholes.
I think there's-
Potholes, freeze thaw, just water being asphalt sitting there, deteriorates the material faster than if it's high and dry, doesn't
Yeah.
see water and so.
I feel we have like two responsibilities in a way. One is to convince one another and to convince the community that we've done our homework, and that what we're saying is there's an accuracy to what we're saying, within some, we don't have a crystal ball, we have a rearview mirror, but we don't have a crystal ball. So that's one responsibility. that we have. And I think we're working hard to try to do that, and you can see that. So but please ask questions. I think the other responsibility is kind of to articulate to your point, like, why are we doing it, right? And I think it comes down to, once again, fairly simply, like, does the community, do we and does the community believe like this is an important enough amenity, which if it goes away, it will have a profound impact on the community. And I have my own views on that. I'm not suggesting, my views apply to everybody else, but I would say, yeah, I think it's important enough. But to Martha's point, it all comes down to a cost-benefit analysis. And I think that's still to be done. And we have to do that seriously.
What it would,
We have to do it very seriously, and that goes back to convincing the community that we've done our homework here.
But can I just clarify, though, that the charge of this particular body, I mean, to your question, I think it's valid, and thank you for asking it, but the charge of this body is, quote, to regrade parking lot to correct drainage issues. Mm-hmm. So this body does not have the discretion to say yes or no to that. We can evaluate it and cost effective, but then that goes really back to the Park and Rec Commission. So just to clarify what our role is versus other bodies in town. So
yeah.
It's black and white as for what our goal is here.
Yeah.
I mean, just to,
appreciate that.
Clarify who's doing what.
Yeah, and sometimes I kind of
well, you wear both hats.
Flip my hat, so, but thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
I've been going to Pear Tree Point
I'm sorry.
for 55 years, Betty Hartmeyer, Harriet Lane.
Thank you.
And I certainly understand the distinction between what we said tonight and the building and everything, but there's two different problems here. The erosion on Pear Tree Point and the parking lot has it's always been. My question is, when you start to put fill in, and we talk about the flooding coming on top of the parking lot, what about all the flood that comes up from the bottom onto that? I live in Harriet Lane, and it was wetlands. I don't have a macadam driveway. We have pebbles because there is water not only from the top, but water from the bottom. And that's my question as far as this parking lot and raising the level. You've got the top coming in and the flooding coming in, but what about coming up from the bottom? My second question is not really a question, but seasonal usage of the beach should not be separate. It's 12 months a year.
Agreed.
Many people like me
That's
don't
point.
go to the beach July and August because I don't care for the crowds. I don't care for the sun. And so when you talk about flooding and things in the summer, it's really a 12-month deal for lots of people.
Well, just to clarify that, and then I'll ask these guys to talk about the kind of water coming up. What you saw that we've learned, and once again we're learning a lot here, is that at least based upon what we currently understand, and we'll go back, we'll check what we're saying here, but what we currently understand is that the flooding is more intense and more likely, or the tidal activity is more intense
that I agree.
In the off-season.
I'm not saying that, but we really don't.
Yeah, no, I'm agree. I'm just kind of.
Look outside, we haven't used our snow shovels once all year. So we don't really know. The gentleman from Crane Road who said he's got flooding in his yard that he never had before. And I also wanted to just say quickly that the last meeting that we had should have been the first meeting way back.
Well, let me just.
I learned more out of that meeting than all the other meetings put together.
Yeah. So let me just say, and this is kind of a little unique, and I kind of like the back and forth here. Let me just say a couple of things. So first of all, I'll just speak for myself, since I'm somebody who's never done this before. We're learning as we're going along, right? That's the first thing. Second thing is, people have asked me about this. I've drawn the analogy. It's kind of like shooting a movie. At the end of the day, you get to the end point and you have a complete movie. But when they shoot a movie, they don't shoot the first scene first and the last scene last. So I know it's kind of created some impatience on folks' part, a little bit of frustration. I agree with you. I mean, there's some things that would kind of have been better to learn early on. But we're going to get to an end point, and we're not going to leave anything out. And we're going to do all of the things that we have to do to satisfy, all of us in the community that we've done our homework. So I agree. Hopefully this serves as a template for the next building committee in 54 years when they're going back at it and they got to well, somebody will be, and they're going to have to replace the parking lot.
What I've seen in the 55 years that I have been going to Pear Tree Point is very little change.
I think we're agreeing.
Wonderful.
Well, I think we can,
Absolutely
I think we're agreeing with that.
And the salt water coming up and the flooding, it's been doing it for 50 years or more, and I think it'll continue.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the data we're seeing now is suggesting like things are changing.
And you should,
Yeah.
I agree.
And so,
Just look
thank
at the
you.
weather.
But,
And it's not here, it's global.
Yeah.
So, we're just a speck.
but Dan, do you want to comment on the water coming up?
Oh, yes.
from
Oh,
under-
sorry,
Yes.
yeah.
In terms of the.
Because we talked about this, I think, a couple of
The
weeks ago.
geology or the makeup of this peninsula is, there are no indications that there's hydric soils or wetland conditions, as in what's leading to the water coming up from the ground. It is obviously within the harbor, within the river area, so we do the tidal range of water inundation below grade, but there's no evidence that it's as your neighbor is experiencing a fill within the wetland, which is naturally a low spot collecting water. It's very sandy. We don't have borings necessarily at this point, but we will. They'll confirm all that as to what elevation of rock is, but there's no evidence that's out there right now portraying that we're in that condition where water is seeping up and settling. You'd probably see significant deterioration of your parking lot
I would think so.
with that change, and I don't know if you can attest to this or other opinions, but I think you'd see evidence elsewhere.
I mean, I think it's, the groundwater here is just going to be tidally influenced. You have granular soils, it's probably going to follow the tidal water levels pretty closely. So as things are flooding over the top, you're also getting water up underneath. It'd be a problem if you had berms or some kind of walls up around it that you could get pressure from the groundwater pushing up.
Got it.
But the fact that you don't have that, it's going to flood from above and below at the same time. It's just going to equalize. And we're not seeking to percolate any of the storm water. It's all going out through storm drains. So the saturation of the soils is better. So,
I just know that, there is for every one top, there's a bottom.
yeah.
But to clarify, we don't have that bottom issue
Yeah,
in this site
not seeing
particularly.
We don't know.
Hopefully, we don't.
We hope we don't,
Yeah,
but
I mean, don't
all
you
the
need to do
indications
a
right now.
boring before you go to them to tell them?
We don't need to do borings before we talk with them. No.
Yeah, I would also, I guess I would simply ask the question, it doesn't appear as though, I mean, sure, we're talking about making adjustments, but this is a functioning beach today, functioning tidal environment today, right, with things happening, and we're not seeing the issue that Betty's pointing out, so I guess that's it's not complete evidence, but it's evidence to some extent, right, that a certain situation doesn't exist, right? Okay, great questions. Any other questions or comments, or? Great, thank you guys, appreciate it.
May I have another question?
No.
Oh, we have new business.
After Colin.
What's that? Well, let's move on to our next item, which is new business. So with that, Krista?
Sorry, thank you. Is there a way in which we can get these documents online? Is that possible?
We put them on. They're all online, presentations. It's in the drop down.
I didn't see them there.
It's a little confusing. If you go to.
Because I was looking.
And you go to the Pear Tree Building Committee, and there's a little drop down. And there's documents, there's PowerPoint presentations. And at first I was clicking on documents and didn't see things because I thought this was.
Oh, I was going it right, okay.
Okay, but if you go to PowerPoint.
You need a stylus, you can't do it with a big fat finger, that doesn't.
Mike always says they're good at taking them out anyway.
Got it. No, I've got it. No, I'm good, but thank you. Okay, I just want to make sure that these documents, and to your point, I'm sorry about the road, that there is an image of the road and the flooding on Pear Tree Point Road, if that helps you. That's why I just want to make sure you knew those were there. Okay. Okay, no, I just want to make sure that everything we have is also being accessed by the public. That's what I just want to clarify.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we've tried to make adjustments. I mean, the website is the website, it's the town's website, and we have tried to make adjustments to make it easier to get, with links and things like that. We're open to suggestions to make it even easier.
So this will get, what's this up?
Yeah, so that, basically what happens is, Ryan shoots it to me, I shoot it out to you guys, and then Jeannie or somebody in
We put it up.
Pam's office.
Great, thank
posted.
Okay.
Great, okay. Any other new business? Anybody have anything else? No.
Well, I'm rather confused about why we have been showing the new structure. I mean, Jamie issued a letter back in November saying the Park and Rec Commission should reevaluate the entire charge. We haven't heard anything yet. It's been, November 8th. It's 4 months already. It looks to me like we're telling the public we're selling a particular structure. I mean, we've also got renovation figures. It seems to me if we're going to show a raised structure beside it, we should at least have pictures of what the interior of a renovated bathroom would look like, and we should also have a picture of the interior of the new bathrooms. And I think people also, the main objections that I keep hearing are the bathroom and the building is unattractive. Would be nice if we could have a rendition about what we could do on the exterior, not touching the building, but how we could make the area more attractive. I mean, because these are two real options, and it seems we're selling one, and it's really our job to present both options to the public, I think.
Yeah, let me take a crack, so if I can. So one is, just to clarify the Jamie point about the charge, and once again, far be it for me to speak for Jamie, but I believe this is what Jamie was asking of us. That question came up at the time that the Marine Division came to us and asked for additional space. And just as a reminder to everybody, that's not within our purview. It has nothing to do with Parks and Recs Commission. My initial impulse was to go ask Neil, can you design some space for them? And I realized, wait a minute, that has nothing to do with us. So I think Jamie's point was, if we proceed along that way, and we now know that the Police Advisory Commission is looking into this more deeply, but if we were to proceed along that way, then we need to update the charge to, entitle or license us to kind of look into something that has to do with an entity within the town that's different from Parks and Recs. So I think that was kind of the basis of it. There were some other things, like in the charge, it talks about changing the guard shack. The guard shack had already been changed, so I think Jamie was kind of making that recommendation as a way of doing some cleanup and making sure that it kind of aligns with what we're doing, as opposed to, and now I'm putting my commission hat on, as opposed to telling the commission, hey, we're running into issues here, go rethink whether you want to do this or not. I don't, once again, Jamie can speak for herself, but I don't believe that's not my interpretation. I don't believe that's the commission's interpretation.
Well, I mean, if we don't know.
So let me just finish. I think I'll just, if I can help to kind of answer the question. So that's part of it. I think the job of the committee has been to develop solutions to certain questions and present those back to the commission. It's not the committee who's selling anything. It's not the committee who's, what we've done now is presented information back to the town. So it's not the building committee that's, and we've asked these guys to build a model. That model has been turned over to Parks and Recs and the Parks and the commission. So I just want to clarify that I think the way it's working, I thought, is the way it should be working, but look, I'm open. We've been developing solutions, passing that back to the commission and the town is kind of doing with it what it's doing with it. And the last point I would make is that there is a cost to everything that we're doing here, and I would just remind everybody how we struggled over when we put the RFP together. Should we ask for like one schematic or two schematics? And we're probably into 37 schematics at this point. And Neil and his team have just done a wonderful job, and I can't say enough of just how cooperative these guys have been. And I think everybody should know that, because there hasn't been a point anywhere along the way where he's reminded us, hey, I already did like 17 schematics and I'm not going to do number 18. So I think we've been mindful of going back and asking for additional information until the commission has come back. So I guess the way I've been envisioning this in my role is, if the commission comes back and says, hey, Mike, we want to see a rendition of the interior of the bathroom, and we want to see this, and I think we would go back as a building committee and ask for that, and that information hasn't come back. So I don't know if that's clarifying. I'm just saying it to clarify kind of where we stand as a committee, and to clarify kind of the process here. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, I just want to be clear to the public, like how this process, like, in my mind, should be working. And I think it's working the way it should be working.
Well, I mean, right
As a building, for the building committee.
Okay, but the charge says renovate or build new. And
Yeah,
I mean,
Martha,
those are two
but-
options.
But we've made those recommendations back, both recommendations back to Parks and Recs.
The Park and Recs.
But without a schematic for
No, no.
the renovation.
The Park and Recs Commission charged us to investigate an elevated structure. Okay,
What
to
did-
date, they have not come back and said, stop on the elevated structure, look at the renovation option.
And they voted twice
I
on
mean,
it.
I
And
mean,
they-
the
they
original
voted
charge
twice on it.
has build to renovate. I mean, you know.
But we're working at the discretion, at the direction
So
of
they've
the Park
abandoned
and
the
Recs.
renovate charge.
I don't know.
Well, you
what-
have
We
the
haven't done
commission.
either. I mean,
I
part
don't-
of understanding whether renovation makes sense was understanding what is going to happen to the parking lot over time. Are we going to invest money in renovating a building that perhaps we're going to be told is going to go underwater? We're just getting that information now.
It's not going to go underwater.
But I just
mean-
heard that like tonight, and in the last 2 weeks, we haven't had that information.
But I mean, don't you want to see what the area, how the building, the current building could be made, the area more attractive, and see what kind of a bathroom?
And Neil
it
has done
would-
drawings for that.
No, I mean, you haven't got patios, you haven't got some landscaping pictures. I mean, you know, on the beach, we've
But
had
Martha,
trees and
trying to
whatnot.
cut this short,
Okay.
it's been said that it's not this committee's problem. If Parks and Rec wants to see a second version of it, then Parks and Rec has to tell us. And right now, they haven't told us.
All right, well,
So-
are you
And one of the key-
reevaluating
One
your
of the key
charge?
pieces is we need to hear from the police commission. Right now, we
was
have
gonna say.
allocated space from the police to the existing building. Are they going away? Are we going to accommodate them? We need to understand that piece.
Well, and that's another, why are we showing a model when we don't know if we're going to have to put a police station up there as well?
Would you like us to put them all in the closet? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm just saying, to be fair, I
Because
think you
we
should show
haven't
the
been charged
renovation.
yet, okay? Until we're charged, we can't build.
We're not
And
gonna
we're
have-
going around
We're
here.
showing them one plan and we're not
That's
showing
right,
the
but it
other.
hasn't been approved. It's a plan.
Fine.
It's just, we're going around in circles here. We've been.
I would just
doing the
also
same
say on
thing, so-
the Marine Division, I think, you know, we did have an initial conversation with the Marine Division, and then, you know, they visited with the commission, and I do think that what we had laid out, and not that we have an agreement on it, but what we laid out as a parameter was to suggest, like, if they were to come back to us and ask for space in the elevated, if we were to do an elevated building and they asked for space in that, I think the going-in concept, although this is not something the commission voted on because we didn't get that far, would be that the footprint wouldn't change, the structure wouldn't change, and we potentially sacrifice some space that was allocated for something else and give that over to the Marine Division, as opposed to talking about building a bigger building now. So that's why I think that just answers your point as to, it's not as though we would, there's an assumption that we're going to end up with a different building if the Marine Division says they need some space. And one of the things that clarified that, I'm sorry, Krista, is initially when they came to us with their requirements, they were thinking that they did not have storage in the lower level of an elevated building. So everything that they were thinking about storing, they felt they needed to store also in the space that we gave them. And we clarified, no, you could put your scuba gear and your everything downstairs, and it's basically, you know, you'd need an office. So that's the rationale for not thinking like that, you know.
The storage aspect of the new building. Now, I understand you said, you know, the police can't even put a metal desk in there, okay?
Well, I didn't say it. Deep says that.
Well,
Sorry,
all right.
FEMA says that.
But then, where are we going to put our first aid station? I mean, you know, if you can't put a desk in the storage area, how are you going to have a first aid station in the storage area?
They've said you can have furniture. They said what you cannot have is a fixed.
Can we cut this conversation off here?
Well, I mean, I think it's.
We're talking about the same thing, okay? We're going around in circles. We're not ready to talk about the building. We're not ready to talk about what can go upstairs, downstairs, whatever. We're right now focusing on the parking lot. Once we get that, and then if we get a different charge from Parks
If
and
we're
Rec.
focusing on the parking lot, though, I don't understand why we've been displaying this building.
Well, I go back to hold on.
Okay, I will stop now.
No,
I made my point.
there's an
but-
answer.
and-
Well, it's a question, but there's an answer to it, and it goes back to the point I made earlier. If we're making a movie, we shot that scene before we shot the other scene. And so we made a decision, right, wrong, or indifferent, to start the process with kind of evaluating the structure. In hindsight, maybe that may have been a benefit doing it in a different order, but we made the decision as a committee to go in the order that we went through, and we completed the analysis and the design of a solution for the building before we got to this stage. So it's done. We can't make it undone. You know, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's done, and so far there's nothing to suggest that that building isn't still a viable solution to what the commission has asked us. And so far there's nothing to indicate that we can't have police storage in the lower level, that we can't have first aid space in the lower. All the things that we felt were requirements still hold up in the solution that we've presented. So we've done it in the order that we've done it. It's out there. We've also gone back. We've done a renovate scenario. We've done renovate estimates. It's all out there for the public to see. I mean, anybody who really wants to understand what's going on can see that, hey, it's a lot less money to do a renovate than it is to build a new building. And here's what we get for renovate, and here's what we get with a new building. All of that is out there. So once again, this suggestion that something is kind of being whatever, I don't buy it. It's not happening. And now we're at this stage, and we're going to get this additional information. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to have one complete movie that'll play from beginning to end with all the information about what we're up to here. I understand the frustration. I'm not suggesting I don't understand the frustration, but I'm defending the process we went through here, and I think the process, and it's not because of me personally, I think the process, I don't want the town to believe that there's a flaw in the process. No one can point to that from my perspective. The processes work very, very well, and if you have a problem with, having that model displayed somewhere, you can have a conversation with the commission. Come visit the commission. Has nothing to do with the committee, though.
Well, has the police commission indicated when they're going to come back?
I reached out to Kim a few weeks ago, and they were still working on it. Okay, you said you were going to try to reach out to the chief. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't do that. I mean, I can do that, but my guess is they're going through a process.
I know they touched on it at their last meeting. They touched on it, but basically said they were working on it. Yeah. Because I do check that,
I mean, I believe Jamie made it pretty, did kind of communicate that, we'd like to get an answer in some reasonable window of time also, so it doesn't go on forever.
And where is the Park and Rec Commission on the concession, I understand? Were there a couple of people looking into it or something?
And Pam, I think, has been talking with some consultants.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I just got to get approval in terms of funding for that, but there is a concession consultant that feels that they can show us how successful concessions can be at the waterfront.
And they do research on the different types of options, hot versus cold and all of that, so it seems that may be a good use if I can bring in professionals to assist with that rather than just having commission members try to do some research.
I agree.
So that's in the capital budget.
So you are going to go forward with the consultant on the concession?
Now I have to go just make sure we have funding for it.
Okay.
Is that taken out of there?
But they will come back with a complete analysis of the 2-day study on both sites.
I thought Jamie asked.
But that's outside our purview here.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
So
Good point.
I think Tom would probably like to make a motion.
So again, I'll make a motion.
But can I,
Please, go ahead.
yeah, my question was about the marine. I'm sorry, it's not to say perhaps more.
About the what?
The marine unit. So the police commission, I know they met yesterday. It was not on their agenda. They did not, they did not address it. I couldn't attend, but they did not address it.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I make a motion again to adjourn the meeting for tonight.
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you.